The sun hung low over the horizon, a molten coin spilling fire across the jagged canyons. Dust rose in lazy clouds along the rutted trail that led to Silver Oak Ranch, shimmering like tiny sparks in the heat haze. The wind whispered through the dry grasses, carrying rumors of old tales, the kind the townsfolk murmured by flickering lanterns, of marauders with hearts black as the night and guns swift as rattlesnakes. A rider appeared on the trail, spurs jangling, hat pulled low against the sun. Dust coated his boots, his horse's flanks heaving with each weary step. He moved with caution, as if the land itself watched him with wary eyes. From the ridge above, Elias Crow, the rancher, squinted into the shimmer. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, traced the approaching figure. Elias was a man who spoke little, yet every movement betrayed a lifetime of seeing, surviving, and calculating. He had been called a simple rancher by those who had never crossed the canyons, yet there were scars beneath his sleeves, stories hidden in the lines of his weathered face. The rider slowed as the ranch came into view. Wooden fences leaned under the weight of years, gates squealed on rusted hinges, and horses stamped impatiently in the corral. Beyond the fence, the main house stood stoic, its windows reflecting the burning gold of the sky. The smell of sagebrush and sweat filled the air. Then, from the trail behind the rider, came the sound of hooves, quick, urgent. The rider's eyes widened, and he pressed forward. A young widow, Clara Mayfield, emerged, dragging a small, wounded calf behind her. Her dress was torn at the hem, dust and blood streaking the fabric. She stumbled as she reached the gate, desperation in her eyes, and Elias moved with a quiet urgency to open it. "You'll be safe here, for now," he said, his voice gravelly, steady. He didn't smile, and yet there was a warmth in the way he guided the calf inside. Clara's gaze lingered on him, sensing in his silence a strength she couldn't yet name. There was something in the set of his shoulders, the glint in his eyes, that spoke of battles fought long before she was born. From the canyon shadows, distant hoofbeats echoed, a grim reminder that the tales were not mere stories. The Iron Vultures, marauders whispered about in the villages, were on the move, leaving a trail of fire and fear. The wind carried their ominous laughter, and the heat itself seemed to hold its breath. Elias watched the horizon, hands resting near the tools of his trade, fingers brushing against the faint outline of a Colt tucked beneath the floorboards of his porch. The ranch was quiet, almost too quiet, but he knew better. The desert had ears, the canyons had eyes, and tonight the shadows would come calling. Clara tended to the calf, unaware of the tension coiling around her like a rattlesnake ready to strike. Elias, silent and patient, already calculated their every move, every step, every risk. And in that blistering afternoon, beneath the blazing sun and the watchful cliffs, a legend was beginning, one that would be told in whispers around campfires for decades to come. The afternoon sun bore down like a relentless overseer, turning the Silver Oak Ranch into a shimmering mirage of heat and dust. Inside the main house, the air was thick with the scent of leather, sweat, and old pine. Elias Crow moved quietly among the stables, brushing a coat of dust from the horses, his hands steady, almost ceremonial. There was a rhythm to his movements, a memory of days when life was measured not in hours, but in survival, in gunfire and blood, in choices that could make or break a man. Clara Mayfield knelt beside the wounded calf, her fingers pressing against the warm, trembling flanks of the animal. She glanced up, watching Elias with growing curiosity. There was a strength in him that defied the simplicity of his rancher's garb, a hidden depth, a silent authority that made the hair on her neck rise. The faint scar on his hand, the way his fingers lingered near the revolver beneath the floorboard, the steady glint in his eyes, it all spoke of a past that refused to stay buried. Word came from a neighboring settlement. Villagers had spotted riders in the distance. The Iron Vultures, the marauders whose names were whispered like curses in every dusty town. They were searching for something, though no one knew what. The townsfolk feared them, and rightly so. Their reputation was carved from terror, and the tales told of their cruelty stretched as far as the horizon. Elias listened quietly as a rider delivered the news. His face betrayed nothing, yet his mind was a map of strategies, contingencies, and countermeasures. Each creak of the floor, each whistle of wind through the canyon, each distant hoofbeat became a note in a symphony only he could hear. He moved through the ranch with practiced precision, checking the fences, reinforcing the gates, preparing traps that were nearly invisible against the golden dust. Clara followed, fascinated. How do you know all this?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Elias glanced at her, a flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. A man learns when the world has nothing left to teach him. He remembers what he should never forget, he said. His hand brushed against a worn hunting knife on the wall, its handle engraved with initials that spoke of a lifelong past. A Union soldier, a gunslinger, a man forged in the fire of wars forgotten by time. As the sun began its slow descent, shadows stretched across the ranch, long and watchful. The air itself seemed heavier, the silence taut with anticipation. Clara sensed it. The ranch, so quiet, held a tension that she had never known. Danger was near, and yet there was no panic. Only patience, only readiness, only the quiet knowledge that when the time came, the land and its secrets would reveal themselves. Elias worked into the evening, each motion deliberate, each decision precise. And all the while, the desert whispered of stories yet to unfold, of legends that would rise from dust and blood. Clara, kneeling beside the calf and watching the rancher, felt a stirring of hope, a fragile, trembling hope that perhaps they were not as alone as the wide-open sky had suggested. And somewhere, just beyond the horizon, the Iron Vultures drew nearer, unaware that the quiet rancher they had dismissed as a simple man was a storm waiting to break, a shadow that had learned long ago how to strike before the dawn. Night fell over the desert like a velvet curtain, stretching shadows across the canyons and valleys. The moon hung low, pale and watchful, casting ghostly light on the Silver Oak Ranch. The wind whispered through the jagged rocks, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush, dry dust, and the faint tang of fear. Every creak of the old wooden fence, every rustle of the tall grasses seemed amplified in the quiet. Elias Crow moved silently along the ridge overlooking his land, eyes sharp, fingers brushing the worn handle of his revolver beneath his coat. The Iron Vultures had arrived. He could hear the faint crunch of their boots in the sand, the metallic clink of their weapons. Their shadows stretched long and sinister across the canyon floor. They believed him to be a simple rancher, an easy target, but he was neither simple nor unprepared. Down in the ranch house, Clara Mayfield tended the calf, though sleep had abandoned her hours ago. She sensed the tension radiating from Elias, saw the careful precision in his preparations. Tripwires hidden in the dust, subtle pits near the fence line, rifles concealed behind crates, all designed to turn the land itself into a weapon. She stepped closer to him as he adjusted the angle of a shotgun resting against the porch rail. "Wait, you're really putting that in me?" Clara whispered, her words trembling. It wasn't just fear of the weapons. It was the weight of responsibility he was placing upon her, the trust he demanded, and the courage she didn't know she possessed. Elias met her gaze, calm and unwavering. "It'll be over quick," he said. A simple line, yet beneath it lay a promise, a lesson, a warning. The moment would demand everything from them both. He handed her a small, sharpened blade, a tool not for violence, but for survival. She took it, fingers brushing his, and for the first time felt the power of a shared purpose. The bond forged in quiet preparation, in trust, and in the anticipation of what the dawn would bring. Outside, the Iron Vultures prowled like wolves, testing the perimeter, unaware of the traps and the eyes that watched them. Elias observed their patterns, memorizing each step, calculating angles, and predicting moves. Clara, under his quiet guidance, mirrored his movements, learning the rhythm of strategy, the patience of anticipation. The desert night was alive with suspense. Owls called from the cliffs, coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind carried every sound like a herald of what was to come. Each shadow seemed larger than life, each flicker of moonlight on a blade a signal of danger. And in the heart of it all, the ranch stood like a fortress, silent yet brimming with unseen power, ready to reveal the strength hidden beneath its quiet facade. Elias's eyes lingered on the horizon, the first hint of sun bleeding the edge of the canyon. He did not flinch, did not tremble. The night had been long, full of preparation and patience, and the reckoning was near. Somewhere in the dust and shadows, the bandits were walking straight into the storm that awaited them. And so the night stretched, taut and unyielding, with the desert itself holding its breath, knowing that by dawn, legends would be made. Legends whispered for decades around campfires of a rancher, a widow, and the moment when ordinary men became extraordinary. The first rays of sun sliced through the canyon like sharpened knives, glinting off the dusty earth and the weathered fences of Silver Oak Ranch. The air shimmered with heat and anticipation, and every breath felt heavy, thick with the promise of violence. The Iron Vultures were already at the gates, their horses snorting and pawing the ground, eyes gleaming with greed and cruelty. They believed they were hunting easy prey. They were wrong. Elias Crow stood at the center of his land, hands steady on his revolvers, the morning sun igniting the steel. His calm was absolute, unshaken by the bandits' taunts and jeers. The scars on his hands, the lines etched into his face, the faint gleam of a Union medal tucked beneath his shirt, all whispered secrets the marauders would soon learn. He was no mere rancher. He was a man forged in battles long past, a veteran of wars both far and near, a gunslinger whose aim had once carved justice through chaos. Clara Mayfield crouched behind the corral fence, her sharpened blade ready, eyes wide but unafraid. She moved with the rhythm Elias had taught her, placing herself where she could protect the vulnerable, striking when the opportunity arose. The widow of yesterday had vanished, replaced by a partner in courage who had learned, in one long, tense night, to face fear head-on. The bandits surged forward, and the air erupted with the thunder of gunfire. Dust spiraled into the sky. Bullets kicked up sparks off metal, and the earth itself seemed to tremble under the force of chaos. Elias moved with uncanny precision, every shot calculated, every stance deliberate. He disarmed one bandit with a flick of his wrist, sending the man sprawling into the dust. Another fell to a trap hidden beneath the sand, the rope snapping taut and lifting him from the ground like a marionette caught in a cruel joke. Justice comes swift when you least expect it, Elias muttered, voice low but carrying over the din. His movements were poetry in violence, a deadly dance taught by war and necessity. Clara seized her moment, thrusting her blade to topple a bandit attempting a flank, saving both a horse and a rider. Together, they were unstoppable, a union of skill, courage, and unbreakable will. The leader of the Iron Vultures stepped forward, sneering, underestimating the calm fury of the man before him. Elias's eyes narrowed. In a heartbeat, the gun was drawn, aimed, and fired. The leader's weapon clattered to the ground. Silence fell for a moment, broken only by the labored breaths of the bandits who remained, shaken, stunned, defeated by a man they had deemed ordinary. The battle ended as abruptly as it had begun. The Iron Vultures fled, leaving only dust, hoof prints, and the faintest echoes of their curses. Elias lowered his weapons, the sun catching the lines of his face, the memories of lost battles softened by victory. Clara approached, her hand brushing his, a silent acknowledgement of all that had transpired. And so, the tale began to spread, not of treasure won, nor of gold claimed, but of courage, justice, and hidden strength. The quiet rancher who was more than he seemed, the widow who found her own courage, and the land that held them both. Around campfires for decades, they would be remembered, not as ordinary folk, but as legends born of dust, blood, and the blazing sun of the frontier.